I'm Audrey Mitchell, 32, standing in my $7 million Times Square penthouse, surrounded by 50 of New York's elite. The champagne is flowing, laughter fills the air, and the ball drop is minutes away. Then my parents walk in uninvited, faces frozen in shock as they scan the room filled with their clients, friends, and business partners. My father storms toward me, his voice cutting through the festivities. How could you betray family tradition like this? But they had no idea what I'd discovered about their own betrayal, a secret that would change our family forever. Before I dive into this wild story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button if you've ever been excluded by family, and subscribe to hear more stories about standing up for yourself. Now, let's get into how this all started. Growing up in our sprawling Connecticut home, I was always the odd one out. My parents, Richard and Diane Mitchell, made no secret of their preference for my younger siblings, my sister Megan with her perfect smile and agreeable nature, and my brother Tyler with his easygoing charm and willingness to follow orders without question. From an early age, it was clear which qualities were valued in the Mitchell household: compliance, tradition, and knowing your place. The Mitchell family business, Mitchell Commercial Properties, was my father's pride and joy. Started by my grandfather in the 1962, it had grown into one of Connecticut's most respected commercial real estate development firms. From childhood, I was groomed to join the company, taken to construction sites, taught to read blueprints, and lectured endlessly about responsibility to the family legacy. Yet, despite this preparation, I was never given any real authority or respect. Real estate is about relationships, Audrey. My father would lecture whenever I proposed a new idea. Not everything needs to be disrupted or revolutionized. His dismissive tone made it clear that my Harvard Business School education and modern approach were viewed as liabilities rather than assets. After graduating at the top of my class, I joined Mitchell Commercial Properties with big dreams and innovative strategies. I worked twice as hard as anyone else, arriving first and leaving last, learning every aspect of the business from the ground up. When I secured a small commercial development on my own, the praise I expected never came. Beginner's luck, my father said with a tight smile during the family dinner where I'd hoped to celebrate my win. Let's see if you can maintain those numbers consistently. Meanwhile, when Tyler landed his first deal with extensive help from our father's connections, a champagne toast and company-wide announcement followed. Our family's New Year's Eve celebration was legendary in Greenwich social circles, a lavish black tie affair at my parents' estate, with catering from Michelin-starred chefs, live music, and appearances from local politicians and business elites. The event doubled as a business networking opportunity and annual reminder of the Mitchell family's status. Every year, I dutifully attended, making conversation with potential clients and enduring backhanded compliments about how I was finally growing into my potential. The tension with my family reached a breaking point last summer when I secured the Madison Square development, a prestigious $30 million Manhattan project that my father had pursued unsuccessfully for years. Instead of congratulations, I received thinly veiled accusations of undercutting family contacts and aggressive tactics. "That's not how we do business," my father had said coldly during a tense board meeting. "The Mitchell name stands for something in this industry." The only person who ever seemed to believe in me was Bradley Harrison, my father's longtime business partner. In his 60s with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes, Bradley had been like an uncle to me growing up. Unlike my father, he listened to my ideas with genuine interest. "You've got vision, Audrey," he told me after the Madison Square deal. "Don't let anyone dim that light, not even family." I should have been prepared for what happened next, given the pattern of my life. But nothing stings quite like family betrayal. 3 weeks ago, I accidentally overheard my parents discussing company leadership in my father's study. I had stopped by unannounced with some contract questions and paused outside the door when I heard my name. "Audrey's too impulsive for leadership," my father was saying. "The board would never accept her as president." "Tyler has a much more suitable temperament," my mother agreed. "He'll do as he's advised and maintain the Mitchell way of doing things." I stood frozen, my hand on the doorknob, as they casually discussed giving my brother, who had been with the company barely 2 years compared to my 8, the presidency I had worked toward my entire career. Tyler, who needed my help understanding basic real estate contracts. Tyler, who took 3-hour lunches and called in sick after particularly wild nights out. I walked away without making my presence known, a cold realization settling in my stomach. No matter what I achieved, I would never be good enough for them. But I had no idea that this slight was just the beginning of what was to come. The email arrived on December 18th, just 13 days before New Year's Eve. I was reviewing quarterly projections in my office when my phone chimed with a notification. Seeing my mother's name, I opened it immediately, expecting the usual reminders about the annual celebration, wear something appropriate, arrive by 7, don't bring up controversial business topics. Instead, I read, "Darling, your father and I have decided to keep this year's celebration intimate. With all the tension in the company lately, we think it's best to have a smaller gathering to ring in the new year. We'll catch up in January when things have settled. Love, Mom." I read it 3 times, my coffee growing cold beside me. Intimate had never been a word associated with our family's New Year's Eve extravaganza. And tension in the company was clearly a reference to my recent successes that had outshined my father's. My assistant Zoe knocked and entered, stopping short when she saw my face. "Everything okay?" "I've been uninvited from my family's New Year's Eve party," I said, the words sounding ridiculous as I spoke them aloud. "Apparently, I'm too much trouble to include this year." Zoe's expression shifted from concern to indignation. "That's terrible. After everything you've done for the company this year?" I shrugged, attempting nonchalance while the hurt settled deep in my chest. "It's fine. I'll make other plans." But it wasn't fine. This wasn't just any social event, it was a family tradition and a business necessity. Connections made at the Mitchell New Year's Eve Gala often led to deals closed in January. Being excluded meant being sidelined professionally as well as personally. 2 days later, I drove to my parents' Greenwich estate to drop off Christmas gifts, telling myself I'd been overthinking the situation. Perhaps they really were having a small family gathering. I could be gracious about that. As I approached the circular driveway, I noticed unusual activity for a supposedly intimate gathering. Delivery trucks from the same high-end caterer they used every year. Staff setting up heating lamps on the expansive back terrace. A florist unloading arrangements that certainly weren't for a quiet family dinner. I parked behind a hedge and walked toward the service entrance, where I'd be less likely to encounter my parents. Near the kitchen, I overheard the catering manager speaking with our family's longtime housekeeper, Mrs. Rhodes. "So we're confirmed for 120 guests on the 31st? The caterer asked, reviewing a clipboard. "Yes, and Mr. Mitchell specifically requested the seafood towers be larger than last year's," Mrs. Rhodes replied. "The governor and his wife are attending, along with the usual crowd." I retreated to my car, gifts still in hand, a hollow feeling expanding in my chest. This wasn't an intimate gathering, it was the same lavish party as every year, just without me. They had deliberately excluded me while inviting extended family, friends, and business associates. I drove away with tears blurring my vision, pulling over in a park 2 miles from the house to collect myself. The deliberate nature of the exclusion was what cut deepest. They could have simply told me they didn't want me there, rather than constructing an elaborate lie. The following day, I went to the office despite it being Sunday. With the holidays approaching, I wanted to finalize some paperwork before people became unreachable. The Mitchell Commercial Properties building was deserted, security lights casting long shadows across the lobby as I made my way to the executive floor. I needed some contracts from my father's office, documents I had every right to access as a company executive. As I searched through his meticulous filing system, I noticed a folder labeled Madison Square Project Contingencies. Curious, since this was my project, I opened it. What I found inside made my blood run cold. Emails between my father and several key investors, discouraging them from working directly with me. Memos questioning my competence to handle large-scale development, a drafted press release that minimized my role in securing the deal, instead crediting Mitchell family connections and senior leadership guidance. My hands shaking, I dug deeper. In his desk drawer, I found more damning evidence. A confidential strategy document outlining plans to transition Audrey to a consulting role while promoting Tyler to operations director, a clear stepping stone to company presidency. Most shocking was an email chain between my father and sister Megan, discussing how to convince keyboard members that I was too volatile for leadership positions. But the final betrayal cut, deepest of all. In a locked bottom drawer that I opened with the family key I still possessed, I found a presentation bearing my father's name. As I flipped through it, I recognized the innovative urban development approach I had created and presented to him in confidence last year, an approach he had dismissed as unrealistic. He had taken my work, made minor modifications, and was now presenting it as his own groundbreaking strategy to save the company from what he called stagnation. I photographed everything with my phone, replaced the files exactly as I'd found them, and left the building. In my car, I sat motionless, staring at the company logo on the building's facade. The family business I had given everything to my education. My 20s, my relationships had been systematically working to undermine me, led by my own father. The New Year's Eve exclusion wasn't just a social slight. It was part of a calculated effort to isolate me professionally, to prevent me from making the connections that would strengthen my position in the company and the industry. They weren't just planning a party without me, they were planning a future without me. I returned to my Times Square penthouse in a daze, barely registering the spectacular Manhattan skyline that normally energized me. The place my family had criticized as wastefully extravagant when I purchased it last year now felt like my only safe haven. For 3 hours, I sat on my living room floor, surrounded by the evidence of my family's betrayal, cycling through disbelief, heartbreak, and finally, rage. The same drive that had propelled me to success despite my family's lack of support now fueled a different fire, the determination to show them exactly what they were discarding. My phone rang just after 9. It was Zoe, my assistant, calling about a scheduling conflict for January. "Are you okay?" she asked immediately, clearly hearing something in my voice. "You sound different." Before I knew it, I was telling her everything. Zoe had been with me for 5 years, witnessing firsthand how hard I worked and how little recognition I received. "I'm not surprised," she said when I finished, her voice tight with anger on my behalf. "I've watched how they treat you at company events. But this is worse than I imagined. The worst part is, I don't even know what to do now," I admitted. "You know." Zoe paused. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you. I overheard your father's assistant talking to the events coordinator last week. Apparently, they've invited the Collins Group to the New Year's party. They're hoping to secure that waterfront development deal. The Collins Group was a major investment firm I'd been courting for months. My father had criticized my efforts, saying they were out of our league. Now he was trying to make a deal behind my back at a party I wasn't invited to. This isn't just personal," Zoe continued. "They're using this party to sideline you professionally." A plan began forming in my mind. "My penthouse has a direct view of the Times Square ball drop," I said slowly. "Better than any venue in the city." "Audrey Mitchell, are you thinking what I think you're thinking?" "I need to make some calls," I replied. "Starting with Bradley Harrison." Bradley agreed to meet me for lunch the next day at a discreet restaurant in Tribeca. At 67, he remained sharp as ever, his eyes missing nothing as I laid out what I'd discovered. "I wish I could say I'm shocked," he said, setting down his fork. "Richard has always been threatened by talent he can't control. It was the same with your grandfather, brilliant man, but he kept Richard under his thumb until the day he died. Now Richard does the same to others. Did you know about the plans to promote Tyler over me?" Bradley nodded grimly. "I tried to argue against it in board meetings. Pointed out your track record, the Madison deal, everything you've accomplished. But Richard has too many loyalists who won't challenge him. And my New Year's Eve exclusion? That I didn't know about." Bradley looked genuinely surprised. "That annual party is as much business as celebration. Excluding you makes no professional sense." "Unless they're actively trying to limit my industry connections," I said. Bradley was quiet for a moment. "What are you planning, Audrey?" I outlined my idea, hosting a competing New Year's Eve event at my penthouse, inviting key industry players who would normally attend my parents' party. "It's bold," Bradley said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "And exactly what Richard wouldn't expect from you. He thinks you'll sulk privately, not strike back publicly." "I need your help," I told him. "You know who matters in this industry, who's dissatisfied with my father's old-school approach. "Count me in," Bradley replied without hesitation. Richard's been coasting on reputation for too long while taking credit for other people's work, including mine occasionally. It's time for a changing of the guard. With Bradley's support, the plan took shape rapidly. First, I called Catherine Walsh, the city's most sought-after event planner who normally booked a year in advance. 2 weeks' notice for New Year's Eve? She laughed when I explained what I wanted. Normally I'd say impossible, but... She paused. "Your father poached my biggest client last year with some underhanded tactics. Let's just say I'm motivated to help you succeed." Next came the strategic guest list. Bradley provided names of industry players who respected my work and were growing tired of my father's outdated methods. Zoe compiled contact information for clients I'd personally brought to Mitchell Commercial Properties, many of whom had dealt with my father's dismissive attitude. My friends Jasmine and Ryan, who worked in finance and PR respectively, offered to help coordinate. Jasmine had connections with several social media influencers who could generate buzz, while Ryan knew people at business publications who might be interested in covering an unexpected industry event. "What about food?" Ryan asked during our planning session. "Your father always brags about having Chef Marcel. Leave that to me," I said with a smile. I had gone to college with Marcel's sous chef, Dominic, who had recently struck out on his own and was looking for high-profile opportunities. One phone call later, and he agreed to create a menu that would outshine anything at my parents' gathering. The invitations went out digitally on December 23rd, elegant, understated, with a photo of the Times Square view from my penthouse and the simple text, "Audrey Mitchell invites you to welcome the new year where the world watches. Cocktails, cuisine, and connections that will shape the coming year." The responses began flooding in immediately. To my surprise and satisfaction, almost everyone accepted, including 3 board members from Mitchell Commercial Properties. The final touch came from Ryan, who accidentally let slip to a business insider at the New York Commercial Real Estate Journal that an exclusive New Year's Eve gathering was being hosted by the Mitchell heiress, positioned to reshape the family empire. The resulting blind item generated exactly the kind of industry whispers I'd hoped for. Standing in my penthouse on Christmas Eve, looking out at the city lights, I felt a strange mix of sadness and determination. This wasn't how I'd imagined challenging my family's perception of me, but they had forced my hand with their betrayal. Now I would show them and everyone else exactly what Audrey Mitchell was capable of creating on her own terms. The call from my father came at 7:43 a.m. on December 26th. I was reviewing floral arrangements with Catherine when his name flashed across my phone screen. Taking a deep breath, I excused myself to answer. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" His voice, normally controlled even when angry, trembled with rage. "Good morning to you too, Dad," I replied, forcing calm into my tone. "I assume you've heard about my New Year's Eve gathering." "Gathering? You're deliberately sabotaging a 30-year family tradition. The Stevensons just called to send their regrets because they're attending your party instead. The Stevensons owned 3 shopping centers we managed. Their defection would sting." "How interesting that they'd choose my event over yours," I said. "Perhaps they prefer working with the person who actually increased their property values by 17% this year." "This isn't about business performance," he snapped. "This is about family loyalty. Something you clearly know nothing about." The irony was so rich, I almost laughed. Family loyalty? Like secretly planning to promote Tyler over me? Or undermining my deals behind my back? Or taking credit for my development strategy? A telling silence stretched across the line before he recovered. "I don't know what you think you've discovered, but if you continue with this stunt, you can consider yourself out of the family business permanently." "Is that supposed to be a threat or a promise?" I countered. "Because from where I'm standing, Mitchell Commercial Properties has been trying to push me out for years while benefiting from my work. You've always had an overinflated sense of your contributions," he said coldly. "This conversation is over. Cancel your event, or face the consequences." The line went dead. I stood motionless for a moment, his words echoing in my head. Despite knowing the truth, his dismissal still had the power to hurt me. Catherine approached cautiously. "Everything okay?" "My father just threatened to disown me professionally," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Are you having second thoughts?" I looked at the mood board she'd created for the event, sophisticated, modern, with subtle references to new beginnings. Absolutely not. In fact, let's add that champagne tower we discussed. The one that seemed too extravagant. Catherine grinned. Now you're talking. My mother's call came that afternoon, her approach predictably different but equally manipulative. Sweetheart, what's this I hear about you hosting an event on New Year's Eve? Her voice dripped with concern. Your father is beside himself. I'm sure he is, I replied, sorting through RSVPs. But since I wasn't welcome at the family celebration, I made other plans. There's been a misunderstanding, she said smoothly. When I said intimate, I simply meant we were scaling back slightly. Of course you were included. Mom, I know about the caterers, the guest list, everything. Please don't insult my intelligence by lying. A pause. Audrey, you have to understand. Your father felt it would be awkward, given the tension at the office. He thought it best if what? If I disappeared while he courted my clients and took credit for my work? If I stayed home while Tyler got paraded around as the future of the company? You've always been so dramatic, she sighed. This is exactly why what? Why I'm not worthy of the Mitchell name? Why I don't deserve a place at the table despite bringing in more business than anyone else this year? You need to cancel this event, she said, her pretense of motherly concern evaporating. It's embarrassing for the family. I'm afraid I can't do that. My guests are looking forward to it. Then you leave us no choice but to take action, she said, her voice turning icy. Your father has already spoken with the board about your future at the company. After my mother's call, I thought I'd weathered the worst of it. I was wrong. That evening, my sister Megan called, her voice shrill with indignation. What is wrong with you? She demanded without preamble. Do you have any idea what you're doing to Mom and Dad? Hello to you too, Megan. Don't get cute with me. You're destroying a family tradition out of spite. Interesting perspective, considering I was specifically uninvited. Because you've been impossible to be around, she exclaimed. Everything's a competition with you. Nothing's ever enough. Dad gives you major projects, and you still act like you're being persecuted. Did Dad tell you to call me? I asked, suddenly curious. Or was this your idea? Does it matter? Someone has to talk sense into you. It matters because I found the emails, Megan. My voice dropped lower. The ones where you and Dad discussed how to convince the board I'm too volatile for leadership. The silence on the other end told me everything. That's not. You don't understand the context, she finally stammered. I understand perfectly. You've been playing both sides, sympathizing with me while helping Dad undermine my position. What I don't understand is why. What did I ever do to you that justified that kind of betrayal? You've always had everything handed to you, she burst out. Dad's attention, the best projects, fast track to leadership. Some of us have had to work for recognition. I was momentarily speechless. Had we been living in the same reality? Megan, that's not. None of that is true. Dad has criticized and sidelined me at every opportunity. He's given you and Tyler advantages I never had. That's your warped perception, she spat. Cancel this ridiculous party and apologize to the family. It's your last chance to fix this mess. I ended the call without responding, a heaviness settling in my chest. The depth of my family's distorted view of me was even worse than I'd imagined. The next morning, my brother Tyler appeared at my apartment door. Unlike our father and sister, he looked uncomfortable rather than angry. Can I come in? He asked, hands shoved in his coat pockets. I stepped aside to let him enter, noticing how he surveyed the partially decorated space with obvious surprise. This is actually really nice, he admitted. Dad always made it sound like you'd bought some overpriced shoebox. Dad says a lot of things that aren't true, I replied, offering him coffee. I assume you're here to talk me out of my New Year's plans? Tyler sighed, dropping onto a bar stool. That was the assignment, yes. Dad's on the warpath. I've never seen him this angry. And how do you feel about it? Tyler looked up, startled by the question. Me? I don't know. This whole situation is messed up. I studied my younger brother's face. At 28, he still had a boyish quality that made people want to help him. I wondered how much he really knew. Tyler, are you aware that Dad is planning to name you company president despite your limited experience? His eyes widened in genuine shock. What? No. That's not. I'm nowhere near ready for that. I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos of the documents I'd found. He read them slowly, his face paling. I swear, Audrey, I had no idea. This isn't what I want. He looked up, distressed. I don't even like real estate development that much. I only joined the company because Dad expected it. What would you rather be doing? I asked, realizing I'd never actually had this conversation with my brother. Honestly, sustainable architecture. I've been taking night classes, but Dad doesn't know. He'd call it impractical. For the first time in years, I felt a genuine connection with my brother. We'd both been trying to please a father who could never be satisfied. Tyler, you don't have to be Dad's puppet, I said gently. You can build your own life. He ran a hand through his hair. Easy for you to say. You've always been brave enough to challenge him. And look where it's gotten me, I said with a wry smile. Excluded from family events and secretly undermined. Tyler was quiet for a moment, then looked at me with newfound resolve. I'm not going to ask you to cancel your party. In fact, he hesitated. I'd like to come, if that's okay. It was the last thing I expected to hear. Are you serious? Dad will explode. Let him, Tyler said with a shrug that didn't quite hide his nervousness. Maybe it's time I stopped playing my assigned role, too. After Tyler left, I felt both heartened by his support and worried about what might come next. I didn't have to wait long to find out. That afternoon, Jasmine forwarded me an email that had been circulating among our mutual contacts in the industry, a message from my sister Megan, claiming I was experiencing personal difficulties and suggesting people should reconsider associating with her ventures at this time. Before I could process this new attack, the building concierge called to inform me someone had tried to access my apartment while I was out at a meeting with the caterer. The security footage showed a man I recognized as my father's personal assistant, Martin, attempting to use what looked like a keycard on my door. How he thought he would get past building security was beyond me, but the attempt itself was disturbing. When I returned home that evening, I found an unmarked envelope that had been slipped under my door despite the building's strict security protocols. Inside was a single typed note: know your place. Cancel the event or face consequences. Some family matters should remain private. The threat should have frightened me. Instead, it only reinforced my determination. They were scared enough to resort to intimidation tactics, which meant I was on the right track. With just 5 days until New Year's Eve, my penthouse was transforming into something magical. Catherine had brought in her top team, and the results were spectacular. Crystal installations caught the light from every angle, creating the effect of stars brought indoors. Custom lighting highlighted the panoramic views of Times Square and the Manhattan skyline. A raised platform gave clear sightlines to where the famous ball would drop. We've secured the Vantage String Quartet for the first half of the evening, Catherine informed me as we walked through the space, and DJ Ellis will take over at 10 to bring the energy up toward midnight. Perfect, I nodded, mentally calculating how this compared to my parents' traditional jazz ensemble. What about the champagne? 200 bottles of Krug Grand Cuvée, plus the Dom Perignon Rosé for the midnight toast. The ice sculpture will be delivered that morning. It's a replica of the Times Square ball, but with subtly incorporated Mitchell Commercial Properties architectural elements. I smiled at the thoughtful detail, a reminder to everyone of my connection to the family business, regardless of my parents' attempts to distance me. Dominic, the chef, had created a menu that perfectly balanced sophistication with comfort-elevated versions of nostalgic New Year's Eve foods from around the world, plus stations featuring signature dishes from each continent. The seafood tower will make your father's look like Red Lobster, he promised with a wink. I've sourced everything from sustainable fisheries, something I know matters to you but your father always refused to pay extra for. The guest list had grown to 75 confirmed attendees, including key industry figures who had never before missed my parents' gathering. The Collins Group, the investors my father had been courting, had RSVP'd enthusiastically, requesting a private conversation with me during the event. Media interest had snowballed after Ryan's strategic leak. 3 lifestyle publications had requested photo access, and a business journal wanted to interview me about emerging leadership in traditional family enterprises. I carefully scheduled these for the days following the event, wanting the party itself to remain focused on relationship building rather than publicity. In the midst of this whirlwind of preparation, Bradley called with news. "We need to meet," he said, his voice serious. "There's more you should know." We arranged to meet at a quiet coffee shop in Chelsea, away from industry haunts. Bradley arrived, looking troubled, a thick folder under his arm. "I've been doing some digging," he said after ordering coffee. "After what you found, I was curious what else Richard might be hiding." He slid the folder across the table. Inside were financial documents showing a pattern of concerning transactions over the past 18 months. "The company's in trouble," Bradley explained as I flipped through the pages. "Richard's made a series of increasingly risky investments trying to compete with newer, more innovative firms. Most have underperformed significantly." "How bad is it?" I asked, scanning the numbers. "Bad enough that he's been moving money between accounts to maintain the appearance of liquidity. Not illegal, exactly, but definitely concerning. The Westlake project is underwater by at least $8 million, and the Harborview development is stalled because they can't secure additional financing." I looked up, shocked. "How is this possible?" "Our financial statements are carefully presented to hide the problems," Bradley finished. "I only found this because I know where to look. The annual New Year's party isn't just tradition this year, it's a desperate networking opportunity. Word is Richard's hoping to secure emergency investment from the Janssen Group." "The Janssen Group?" I repeated incredulously. "They're notoriously predatory." "Desperate times," Bradley said grimly. "But here's what's really going to interest you." He pointed to a section of the report. "Look at the few bright spots in the portfolio." I followed his finger and saw my projects Madison Square, the Brooklyn redevelopment, the Hartford conversion all performing at or above projections, creating the only positive cash flow the company had seen in months. "My work is keeping the company afloat," I said slowly, the realization dawning. "While Dad criticizes my methods publicly, he's desperately dependent on your results privately." Bradley nodded. "And there's one more thing you should know. Your innovative urban development approach, the one he stole, he's not just presenting it as his own. He's betting what's left of the company's reserves on implementing it for the Riverside project." The revelation left me breathless. My father had built his career on conservative, traditional development approaches. He'd mocked my ideas about mixed-use spaces, community integration, and sustainable materials as idealistic nonsense. Now he was not only stealing those ideas but staking the company's future on them. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked Bradley. "You're on the board. Your loyalty should be to the company, to my father." Bradley's expression softened. "I've watched your father take credit for other people's work for 30 years, including mine when we were younger. I've seen how he undermined your grandfather's vision after taking control. And I've watched him consistently dismiss the brightest mind in the company because he can't stand being outshone by his daughter." He reached across the table, putting his hand over mine. "The company needs new leadership, Audrey. Leadership with integrity and vision. Your vision." Back at my apartment, I was still processing this new information when my mother called again. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won out. "Audrey, this has gone far enough." She began without greeting. "Half the board is attending your event instead of ours. Your father is beside himself. I'm surprised he has time to worry about a party, given the company's financial situation," I replied. A telling silence. "What are you talking about?" "The $8 million hole in the Westlake project. The stalled Harborview development. The desperate courtship of the Janssen Group, who will strip the company for parts the moment they get control." "How did you?" She stopped herself. "These are complex business matters you don't fully understand." "I understand perfectly well, Mom. Just like I understand that my projects are the only ones keeping Mitchell Commercial Properties solvent right now. The same projects Dad criticizes while secretly implementing my strategies elsewhere." Another long pause. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its imperious tone. "Your father is under tremendous pressure." "Pressure of his own making," I countered. "He could have embraced new approaches years ago instead of clinging to outdated methods." He could have acknowledged my contributions instead of undermining them. He could have treated me like a valuable team member instead of a threat. "You don't understand what it's like for him," my mother said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Watching his daughter surpass him so easily when he worked so hard for everything he achieved. For the first time, I glimpsed the truth behind years of criticism and exclusion. So that's it? He resents me for being good at my job? He's from a different generation, Audrey. Men like your father expect to remain the most successful person in their family. It's how they measure their worth. "That's not my problem," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I felt a complicated mix of emotions, anger at the unfairness, but also a new understanding of the insecurity driving my father's behavior. "Just think about what you're doing," my mother pleaded. "This company is your heritage too." After hanging up, I stood at my window, looking out at the city. My mother had inadvertently revealed something important. My father's hostility wasn't just about control or tradition, it was about fear. Fear of becoming irrelevant, of being overshadowed, of losing his identity as the family success story. It didn't excuse his actions, but it helped me see the situation more clearly. This wasn't just about a New Year's Eve party or even my position in the company. It was about a fundamental shift in power, one my father had been desperately trying to prevent, even as it became increasingly inevitable. With just 3 days until New Year's Eve, the sabotage attempts began in earnest. First, the florist called in a panic, claiming they had received a cancellation request from my office and had already reassigned their staff to another event. Fortunately, Catherine had connections with a boutique flower studio that could step in, though at a premium price. Next, the catering company reported that their refrigeration truck had been vandalized in their secure lot. Coincidentally, the truck containing the specialty ingredients for my event. Dominic managed to source replacements, but it was another clear message. Someone was determined to derail my plans. The most blatant disruption came when the Vantage String Quartet called to apologetically back out, explaining they had received a more lucrative last-minute offer they couldn't refuse. When pressed, they admitted the offer had come from none other than Mitchell Commercial Properties for an event on the same night. "Your father's assistant implied there might be ongoing performance opportunities if they chose his event over yours," Catherine explained after making some inquiries. "Money talks. So does reputation," I replied grimly. "Find me a better quartet one that will actually honor their commitment." Through Bradley's connections, we secured the Meridian Ensemble, a more prestigious group that had performed at Carnegie Hall. Another problem transformed into an advantage. On the morning of December 30th, just 1 day before the event, I arrived at my building to find security in disarray. Someone claiming to be from my family office had attempted to access the building's master keys, insisting they needed to check my apartment for a gas leak. We verified with the utility company that there was no reported leak, the head of security assured me, and the man couldn't produce any identification when questioned. "We've increased patrols on your floor as a precaution," I thanked him, unnerved by the escalation. These weren't just petty attempts to disrupt a party, they were increasingly concerning breaches of security and privacy. The final straw came that afternoon when Catherine called, her voice tense with controlled anger. "We need to meet. Now. There's a situation with your event planner." We met at a wine bar near my apartment. Catherine looked unusually disheveled, her normally perfect composure cracked. "Your father contacted me directly," she said without preamble. "Offered to triple my fee if I would create insurmountable logistical problems for your event. When I refused, he threatened to blacklist my company from any future Mitchell properties." I stared at her, stunned by this new low. "Catherine, I'm so sorry. I never thought he'd go this far." "That's not all," she continued, her voice hardening. "He mentioned details about the event that I've only discussed with you and a few key members of my team. Someone in our inner circle has been feeding him information." My mind raced through possibilities. The catering staff? The security team? My own building management? "I think I know who it is," Catherine said, watching my face carefully. "Your friend Jasmine has been asking my team unusually specific questions about vendor details, security arrangements, guest arrival protocols, information beyond what a friend helping with an event would typically need." The suggestion felt like a physical blow. Jasmine and I had been friends since college. She was one of the few people I trusted completely. That's impossible, I said automatically. Jasmine would never. Check your guest confirmations, Catherine interrupted gently. The RSVPs that came through her versus directly to you. See if there's a pattern. Back at my apartment, I did exactly that, combing through the responses. A sickening pattern emerged. Key industry figures Jasmine had claimed were attending had never actually confirmed. Others, she reported as regretfully declining, had in fact accepted my invitation directly. She had been systematically manipulating the guest list, creating a false picture of who would attend. With a heavy heart, I called and asked her to come over immediately. When she arrived, her usual confident demeanor seemed strained. Is everything okay? You sounded intense on the phone. I handed her a printout of the discrepancies I'd found. I need you to explain this. She glanced at the paper, her face draining of color. Audrey, I can explain. Please do, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. Explain why you've been sabotaging my event while pretending to help me. Explain why you've been reporting back to my parents about every detail. Jasmine sank onto the couch, the facade crumbling. Your father approached me right after you started planning this. Said if I helped him manage the situation, he'd help James secure financing for his startup. James was Jasmine's husband, whose tech company had been struggling to attract investors. He said he just wanted information at first, she continued, tears forming, to make sure you weren't doing anything that would embarrass the family. But then he started asking me to change small things, redirect certain guests, misplace contact information. And you agreed, I said flatly. After everything you've seen my family put me through over the years. You don't understand, Audrey. James was about to lose everything. We were going to have to sell our apartment, move back to Ohio. Your father offered a lifeline. At my expense. I told myself it was just a party, she whispered. Not worth ruining your friendship over. I was going to come clean after the holidays. I looked at this woman I'd trusted for over a decade, trying to reconcile the friend I knew with the betrayal in front of me. I think you should leave, I said quietly. Audrey, please. I understand why you did it, I interrupted. Family pressure, financial desperation, believe me, I get it. But I can't have you involved in this event anymore. And I need time to decide what this means for our friendship. After Jasmine left, I sat alone in my half-decorated apartment, feeling more isolated than ever. I'd lost my family's support, and now one of my closest friends had betrayed me too. My phone rang, breaking the silence. It was Bradley. How are you holding up? He asked, somehow sensing my state of mind. I've been better, I admitted. Jasmine was working for my father the whole time. Bradley sighed heavily. I wish I could say I'm surprised. Richard has always been skilled at finding leverage over people. I'm starting to wonder if this whole thing is a mistake, I confessed. Maybe I should just cancel, try to repair things with my family. Is that really what you want? Bradley asked. To go back to being undervalued and undermined? To watching Tyler get credit for your work? To seeing your father implement your ideas while publicly dismissing you? Put like that, the answer was clear. No. But I'm tired of fighting alone. You're not alone, Bradley said firmly. And there's something I've been meaning to tell you. Something I should have said years ago. I waited, hearing him take a deep breath on the other end of the line. I've always admired your determination, your vision, your refusal to compromise your principles even when it would be easier to go along with Richard's way of doing things. But it's more than professional admiration, Audrey. I care about you deeply, in a way that probably isn't appropriate given our professional relationship. The confession caught me completely off guard. Bradley had always been supportive, even protective. But I'd attributed it to his friendship with my grandfather, his mentor. I don't expect anything, he continued quickly. And if this makes you uncomfortable, we can pretend I never said it. But I wanted you to know that someone really sees you and believes in you completely. I found myself smiling for the first time that day. Thank you for telling me, Bradley. I need time to process that. But it means a lot to know. I have your support. Always, he said simply. Now, let's make sure this party is everything it needs to be. After hanging up, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The next morning, I met with Catherine to restructure security protocols, change access codes, and establish a new chain of communication for last-minute changes. We created a small, trusted inner circle, just Catherine, Bradley, Zoe, and myself, who would handle all sensitive details going forward. That afternoon, I received word that my building's management had been approached by my father's lawyers, claiming the size of my event violated some obscure building regulation. It was a desperate, last-minute attempt to shut us down through legal means. Fortunately, I had done my homework. I produced the written approval from the buildings board that I had secured weeks earlier, along with permits from the city for a gathering of this size. The building manager apologized for the confusion and assured me the event could proceed as planned. As the final decorations went up and the catering staff began preliminary preparations, I stood in the center of my transformed living room, looking out at the city lights. Tomorrow night, everything would change whether I succeeded in establishing my independence or burned bridges beyond repair. Either way, there would be no going back to the way things were before. New Year's Eve arrived with a crystalline blue sky and unusually mild temperatures for December, perfect weather for the floor-to-ceiling views from my penthouse. By 4 o'clock, my home had been transformed into a sophisticated wonderland. Crystal chandeliers reflected light across the space. White orchids and silver accents created an elegant winter theme without resorting to cliched holiday decorations. The bar was stocked with top-shelf spirits and rare vintages. Servers in crisp black attire stood ready with trays of champagne. The photographers are set up, Catherine informed me as I emerged from my bedroom in a silver column dress that deliberately echoed the Times Square ball. And the first guests will arrive in 30 minutes. I surveyed the space, noting how the layout guided the eye toward the spectacular view while creating intimate conversation areas. "It's perfect," I told her. "Better than I imagined." "Your father's going to have a coronary when he sees the photos," she replied with a satisfied smile. "Speaking of which, security is fully briefed. They know your family isn't on the guest list." The first arrivals were Bradley and 2 board members who had chosen my event over my parents. Their early appearance sent a clear message of support that wasn't lost on me. "The place looks spectacular," said Howard Jameson, the longest-serving member of our board. "Much more impressive than the usual stuffy affair at your parents'." By 7, the apartment was filled with a steady stream of arrivals, real estate developers, investment bankers, architects, city officials, and social figures whose presence lent cachet to any gathering. Many were longtime attendees of my parents' New Year's celebration, their presence here a pointed choice. The Collins Group executives arrived at 7:30, immediately asking for a private conversation. In my home office, they expressed interest in backing my Madison Square expansion plan with me personally, not through Mitchell Commercial Properties. "We've been impressed with your vision and execution," Elizabeth Collins said. "And frankly, we're concerned about the rumors regarding your family company's financial stability." "I appreciate your confidence," I replied carefully. "But I'm still an executive at Mitchell Commercial." "For now," she said with a knowing look. "Let's reconnect in January. We believe there may be a significant opportunity for the right leadership." By 9, the party was in full swing. The Meridian Ensemble played a sophisticated selection that set the perfect ambiance without overpowering conversation. Dominic's food stations drew appreciative crowds, with his innovative takes on traditional New Year's dishes becoming a central topic of discussion. I circulated through the room, connecting investors with architects, developers with city officials, creating exactly the networking opportunities my father had tried to deny me. Multiple guests commented that this was the most enjoyable industry event they'd attended in years. "You've outdone yourself," Bradley murmured, appearing at my side with a fresh glass of champagne. "Everyone who matters is here." "Almost everyone," I said, scanning the crowd. "Tyler texted that he's running late but coming." "That's going to cause a stir," Bradley observed. "Richard will see it as the ultimate betrayal." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a message from the building's security desk. "Miss Mitchell, your brother Tyler has arrived with a guest." Minutes later, Tyler stepped off the elevator with a woman I didn't recognize, petite, stylishly dressed, with an intelligent face and warm smile. "Audrey, this is Dr. Sophia Lynn," Tyler said, looking both nervous and proud. "My girlfriend of 8 months." "Sophia." My sister Audrey. 8 months? I repeated, accepting Sophia's handshake. How have I never heard about you? Because Dad doesn't approve, Tyler said simply. Sophia's an environmental architect focused on sustainable urban development, everything Dad considers trendy nonsense. Which is code for threatening to his business model, Sophia added with a wry smile. It's wonderful to finally meet you, Audrey. Tyler talks about you constantly. We've been keeping our relationship quiet, Tyler explained. But after our conversation, I realized I'm tired of hiding things that matter to me. So we decided to start the new year honestly. I hugged them both, genuinely touched by this show of solidarity. I'm glad you're here, both of you. As they moved into the party, I noticed several guests checking their phones with surprised expressions. Following their lead, I checked mine to find multiple messages from colleagues still at my parents' event, reporting that the atmosphere there had turned tense after several key guests departed early, presumably to attend my gathering instead. At 10:30, security called again. Miss Mitchell, your mother is in the lobby, requesting access. I hesitated, then made a decision. Send her up. When the elevator doors opened, my mother stepped out alone, her expression unreadable. She wore her traditional New Year's attire, an elegant black gown with pearls, but something in her demeanor seemed different. Less imperious, more uncertain. Audrey, she said, taking in the crowded room, the sophisticated decor, the obvious success of the event. We need to talk. I led her to my home office, closing the door on the curious glances that followed us. I'm surprised to see you here, I said once we were alone. Shouldn't you be hosting your intimate gathering? She winced slightly at the reminder of her lie. Your father doesn't know I'm here. That was unexpected. In 35 years of marriage, I couldn't recall my mother ever acting independently of my father's wishes. Why are you here, Mom? She sank into a chair, suddenly looking exhausted. The company is in trouble, Audrey. Serious trouble. I know, I replied. Bradley showed me the numbers. It's worse than whatever Bradley showed you, she said, meeting my eyes directly. Your father has been hiding the full extent of the problems even from the board. The Westlake project isn't just underwater, it's a complete disaster. Cost overruns, permit issues, contractor disputes. Why are you telling me this? Because despite everything, you care about the Mitchell legacy, and because you're the only one who might be able to save it. I leaned against my desk, studying my mother's face. Does Dad know that? He knows, she sighed. He's just too proud to admit it. Too proud to ask for your help after the way he's treated you. He's actively tried to sabotage my career, I pointed out. He stole my development strategy and presented it as his own. He excluded me from the family celebration and then attempted to destroy my alternative event. And now I'm supposed to swoop in and save him? Not him, my mother said quietly. The company. Your grandfather's company. The legacy that should be yours someday. For the first time, I heard genuine regret in her voice. I've enabled his behavior for too long, Audrey. I told myself it was loyalty, but it was really cowardice. I didn't want to challenge him, to risk his disapproval. So I stood by while he pushed away the one person who could see where the industry was heading. The admission stunned me. My mother had always presented a united front with my father, reinforcing his decisions, echoing his criticisms. What happened tonight to bring you here? I asked. I watched him panic as the Stevensons left early, then the Jansen group canceled their meeting. Then Tyler texted that he wouldn't be coming. She twisted her wedding ring absently. It all started crumbling so quickly. And instead of reflecting on why, your father just got angrier, more determined to blame everyone but himself. Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. Catherine poked her head in, her expression apologetic. I'm sorry to interrupt, but security called. Your father and sister have arrived downstairs. They're insisting on coming up. I looked at my mother, whose face had gone pale. Did you tell them you were coming here? No, she said, rising to her feet. But your father has always been able to track my location with the family app. He must have realized where I was. I took a deep breath, considering my options. I could refuse entry, have security escort them out of the building. It would be within my rights after everything they'd done. But it would also be a declaration of all-out war. Let them up, I decided. It's time to finish this, one way or another. My father and sister stepped off the elevator with matching expressions of fury, their entrance creating an immediate ripple of attention through the crowded room. Conversations halted mid-sentence. The Meridian Ensemble faltered briefly before continuing their performance. My father looked exactly as he always did at the annual New Year's Eve event, immaculate in his tuxedo. Silver hair perfectly coiffed, the very picture of old money success. But his carefully maintained composure was cracking around the edges, his face flushed with anger, his movements stiff. Beside him, Megan wore an emerald gown that complemented her auburn hair, her expression a mixture of embarrassment and righteous indignation. She scanned the room, her eyes widening as she recognized how many of our family's regular guests were present. I moved to intercept them before they could create more of a scene, aware that every industry eye was watching this family drama unfold with avid interest. Dad. Megan. This is a surprise, I said, keeping my voice level. I don't recall sending you an invitation. Don't play games, Audrey, my father said, his voice low but vibrating with anger. You've gone too far this time. Where is your mother? I'm right here, Richard, my mother said, emerging from my office with remarkable composure. And I came of my own volition. We'll discuss that later, he said dismissively before turning back to me. Do you have any idea what you've done? The damage you've caused? I was acutely aware of the audience gathering around us, the party guests pretending to continue their conversations while straining to overhear. This confrontation needed to move somewhere private or become completely public. There would be no middle ground. Perhaps we should continue this conversation in my office, I suggested. Oh, now you're concerned about appearances? My father scoffed. After orchestrating this coup? Half the board is here, Audrey. Our biggest clients. Even the Jansen Group canceled our meeting to come to your party instead. Richard, my mother warned, glancing meaningfully at the attentive crowd. But my father was past the point of discretion. Decades of unchallenged authority had left him unaccustomed to restraining himself. You think you're so clever, he continued, his voice rising, swooping in with your modern ideas and flashy presentations. But this isn't how business is done. This isn't how family behaves. You're destroying 30 years of tradition out of petty spite. The accusation hung in the air, so patently unfair that I felt a strange calm settle over me. After years of absorbing his criticism, of second-guessing myself, of working twice as hard for half the recognition, something finally snapped into perfect clarity. Is that really what you think this is about? I asked. Spite? What else would you call it? He demanded. Deliberately undermining your family's signature event? Poaching our guests? Turning Tyler against us? Tyler stepped forward then, Sophia at his side. No one turned me against anyone, Dad. I made my own choice tonight. My father's face darkened as he noticed Tyler's companion. And I see you've brought her. Another demonstration of your poor judgment. That's enough, I said, my voice cutting through the tension. You want to have this confrontation here? In front of everyone? Fine. Let's be completely honest then. I turned to address the now silent room. For those who may be confused about the family dynamics on display, allow me to clarify. I was explicitly uninvited from the Mitchell family's annual New Year's celebration this year, a professional slight as much as a personal one, given how many business connections are formed at that event. My father started to object, but I continued. But that was just the latest in a pattern that's been ongoing for years. A pattern I recently discovered goes far deeper than I realized. From my clutch, I removed printed copies of the documents I'd found in my father's office, holding them up. These are emails and memos showing how my father has systematically undermined my work at Mitchell Commercial Properties while simultaneously implementing my strategies without attribution. Gasps and murmurs spread through the crowd. My sister stepped forward, her face flushed. You're humiliating our family in public, Audrey. This is exactly why Dad says you're too volatile for leadership. Am I volatile, Megan? Or am I finally standing up for myself? I fixed her with a steady gaze. Should I have continued quietly accepting that my innovative urban development approach was stolen and presented as Dad's work? That my successful projects are the only thing keeping the company afloat while I'm passed over for leadership in favor of Tyler, who has a fraction of my experience. Tyler shifted uncomfortably. Wait, what? Dad told me you weren't interested in the presidency. Of course he did, I said without taking my eyes off Megan. Just like he told the board I was too impulsive, too aggressive. Just like he told clients I was difficult to work with. Just like he told you I was holding the company back. Bradley stepped forward then, his presence commanding immediate respect. As the senior board member present, I can confirm that Richard has indeed misrepresented Audrey's contributions to the company while taking credit for her innovations. My father's face contorted with rage. You treacherous old... Careful, Richard, Bradley warned. I have documentation as well. Financial records showing how Audrey's projects are the only profitable ventures in the company's current portfolio. Records I suspect the board hasn't seen in full. Another ripple moved through the crowd as this revelation landed. The Collins Group executives exchanged pointed looks. This is absurd, my father blustered, though I could see the calculation behind his eyes as he registered how many witnesses were present. Mitchell Commercial Properties is financially sound. Is it? I challenged. The Westlake project isn't just behind schedule, it's hemorrhaging money. Harborview is stalled because you can't secure additional financing. You're so desperate you've been courting the Jansen Group, knowing they'd dismantle the company the moment they got control. Lawrence Jansen himself stepped forward, his expression unreadable. That's a serious accusation, Miss Mitchell. But an accurate one, I replied, meeting his gaze steadily. My father approached you because he's running out of options. The company my grandfather built is on the brink of failure because he refuses to adapt to changing market realities. My father lunged forward, grabbing my arm. That's enough. You have no right. Take your hand off her, Bradley said, his voice dangerously quiet. To my surprise, my mother moved between us. Richard, stop this. Now. My father released me, staring at my mother with shocked betrayal. You're taking her side? This isn't about sides, she said firmly. This is about the truth. The truth you've been hiding from everyone, including me. A heavy silence fell over the room. Even the music had stopped. Every person present was witnessing a pivotal moment in Mitchell Commercial Properties history, the public unraveling of its patriarch's carefully maintained facade. My father looked around, suddenly seeming to realize the magnitude of what was happening. His eyes darted from face to face, searching for allies and finding none. Even Megan had stepped back, her certainty visibly wavering. You've bankrupted this company with your antiquated methods and refusal to innovate, I said, my voice clear in the silence. And now you're facing the consequences. For a moment, I thought he might simply walk out, retreat to what remained of his dignity. Instead, his shoulders slumped, the fight draining from him in a visible wave. What do you want from me, Audrey? He asked, his voice suddenly tired. To admit I failed? Fine. The company is in trouble. Serious trouble. The admission seemed to physically pain him. The Westlake project is a disaster. We're over-leveraged on 3 major developments. The banks are threatening to call in loans we can't cover. I hadn't expected capitulation, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. After years of fighting for recognition, to have him publicly acknowledge failure was disorienting. Bradley placed a supportive hand on my shoulder. The question now is what happens next. I straightened my spine, seizing this unexpected opportunity. I have a proposal, I said, addressing not just my father but the board members and key investors present. A restructuring plan that would salvage Mitchell Commercial Properties and restore its financial stability. My father's eyes narrowed. At what cost? A change in leadership, I said simply. I take over as president, with Bradley as chairman of the board. You step into an advisory role, lending your experience without controlling day-to-day operations. You want to force me out of my own company, he said bitterly. I want to save your company, I corrected him. The company you've run into the ground through pride and stubbornness. The company I've spent my career trying to modernize despite your constant resistance. His jaw worked as he struggled with the ultimatum. And if I refuse? Then Mitchell Commercial Properties will likely fail within the year, I said bluntly. And instead of salvaging your legacy, I'll build something new from the ashes, taking the best talent and clients with me." The threat wasn't empty. From the expressions around the room, it was clear many would follow me if I struck out on my own. "You're blackmailing me," my father said, his voice hollow. "I'm offering you a lifeline," I countered. "One you don't deserve after how you've treated me, but one I'm extending anyway out of respect for grandfather's legacy and the employees who depend on the company for their livelihoods." My father looked at my mother, perhaps seeking support, but her expression remained resolute. He glanced at Tyler, who stood with Sophia, clearly unwilling to back him this time. Finally, his eyes found Megan, who looked torn between loyalty and the undeniable truth that had been exposed. "The board would never accept such a radical restructuring," he said, a last attempt at resistance. "Actually," said Howard Jameson, stepping forward, speaking as the senior board member after Bradley, "I believe this proposal merits serious consideration. Given the financial situation, which, I must say, appears more dire than what was presented at our last meeting, new leadership may be precisely what Mitchell Commercial Properties needs." 2 other board members nodded in agreement, effectively ending any debate. My father's last hope for maintaining control evaporated before his eyes. "You have until January 3rd to decide," I told him as the clock inched closer to midnight. "Either way, things change with the new year." 3 weeks later, I sat in what had once been my father's office, now mine. The views of downtown Greenwich stretched before me, winter sunlight glinting off the harbor in the distance. The same mahogany desk remained, but I'd removed the heavy drapes that had always kept the room in perpetual twilight, allowing natural light to flood the space. The transition hadn't been without challenges. My father had ultimately accepted my terms, but not gracefully. The formal announcement of my appointment as president had been met with mixed reactions: support from those who recognized the need for change, resistance from my father's old guard who saw me as an usurper. But the financial markets had responded positively. Once our restructuring plan was made public, with its emphasis on sustainable development and adaptive reuse of urban spaces, our stock had stabilized after months of decline. The banks had agreed to extend our credit lines, giving us breathing room to address the troubled projects. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. My assistant announced, "Your family is here for the meeting." They filed in one by one, my father first, still carrying himself with dignity despite his diminished role. My mother, who had become an unexpected ally during the transition. Tyler, who had finally admitted his desire to pursue sustainable architecture rather than company leadership. And Megan, the most reluctant participant in our new family dynamic. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "I thought it was important for us to have this conversation as a family before the board meeting tomorrow." "Let's just get this over with," my father said, though without the biting edge that would have accompanied such words a month ago. "I've reviewed the Westlake project," I continued, "and I believe we can salvage it with significant revisions to the original plan." I outlined my proposal, converting the troubled commercial development into a mixed-use space incorporating affordable housing, which would qualify for tax incentives and government grants that could offset the existing losses. "It's actually quite brilliant," Tyler commented, studying the plans I'd distributed, especially the community garden integration. My father remained silent, but I could see him analyzing the numbers, looking for flaws in my reasoning. Finally, he said, "The board will resist the shift toward residential. They've always seen it as less prestigious. They'll resist less when they see the projected returns," I replied, "and the positive press will generate as pioneers in mixed-income development." To my surprise, my father nodded slowly. "You may be right. The industry is changing faster than I was willing to acknowledge." It wasn't an apology, but from Richard Mitchell, it was as close as one might get an admission of miscalculation, a recognition that his way might not be the only way. My mother squeezed his hand supportively before turning to me. "The family New Year's celebration next year, I'd like you to host it at your penthouse. It's time for a new tradition, one that includes everyone," Tyler added pointedly. Megan, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "I owe you an apology, Audrey. I believed Dad when he said you were trying to take over, that you didn't respect what he had built. I never considered that he might be the one undermining you." "We've all played our assigned roles for too long," I told her. "Maybe it's time we got to know each other as adults, without Dad's influence coloring our relationship." "I'm sitting right here," my father grumbled, "but without real heat." "Yes, you are," I acknowledged. "In an advisory role, as agreed. And your experience is valuable, Dad. But so are new perspectives, including Megan's marketing expertise and Tyler's environmental focus." As the meeting continued, I realized something fundamental had shifted. For the first time, we were having a genuine family business discussion, with each person contributing their perspectives without fear of dismissal. My father still disagreed with some of my approaches, but he was listening, truly listening, perhaps for the first time. When they left, Bradley arrived for our scheduled meeting, a knowing smile on his face as he observed the family exiting relatively amicably. "Successful peace talks?" "Progress," I said cautiously. "Dad's still Dad, but he's trying, and so am I." Bradley nodded approvingly. "Reconciliation without capitulation, exactly what I would have expected from you." We reviewed the agenda for tomorrow's board meeting, our working relationship as comfortable as ever despite his personal revelation on New Year's Eve. We had agreed to explore our feelings gradually, keeping professional boundaries clear while allowing space for something more to develop. "The Collins Group called again," he mentioned. "They're very interested in backing your Brooklyn waterfront concept." "Tell them we'll meet next week," I replied. "I want to have the sustainability metrics finalized first." As Bradley left, I stood at the window, reflecting on how much had changed in just a few weeks. The painful confrontation at my New Year's Eve party had been necessary a lancing of a festering wound that had poisoned our family and threatened the company's survival. There was still healing to be done. My father's decades of dismissal and undermining couldn't be erased by a single dramatic showdown. Megan's resentment had deep roots that would take time to address. The company's financial challenges remained substantial. But for the first time in years, I felt genuine hope not just for Mitchell Commercial Properties, but for our family. Sometimes you had to break tradition to build something stronger. Sometimes confrontation was necessary before reconciliation could begin. That night, as I returned to my Times Square penthouse, I stood at the window overlooking the city lights. The same view that had provided the backdrop for my defiant New Year's celebration now offered a moment of peaceful reflection. I had fought for my place at the table and finally won the recognition I deserved. But the victory wasn't about proving my father wrong or taking his power. It was about creating something better, a more innovative company, a more honest family dynamic, a future built on mutual respect rather than fear and competition. I thought about the next New Year's Eve, imagining my family gathered in this space, not as adversaries, but as partners in a shared legacy. It wouldn't be perfect, family never is. But it would be authentic in a way the Mitchell family hadn't been for generations. Sometimes the hardest traditions to break are the ones that keep us from growing. And sometimes the best New Year's resolution is to stop accepting less than you deserve. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have confronted your family publicly or tried to resolve things privately? Have you ever had to stand up to family members who didn't value your contributions? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed this story of family drama and professional vindication. Subscribe for more real-life stories of standing up for yourself, and share with anyone who needs inspiration to claim their rightful place at the table. Thank you for watching, and may your own new year be filled with the courage to demand the respect you deserve.